Reports say that Penn State is set to make former Indiana head coach Tom Allen its next defensive coordinator. But is that the right move?
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Penn State fans? That is right. You are Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, channel manager here for the Locked On Nittany Lions, bringing you all things Penn State football, men's basketball, and so much more. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use promo code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Today's episode is also brought to you by Team Ticker, the high-tech sports sign with a retro look. Show your team pride and go to teamticker.com and use promo code LOCKEDON this holiday season to get $50 off your online order. Promo code LOCKEDON for $50 off your online order. Penn State is set to make a move at its defensive coordinator spot, and it's going to be, it looks like all the indications point to Tom Allen, the former Indiana head coach. Now, nothing is official yet, but it seems like the negotiations are going along and a final deal is getting ready to be made. Before we get to any of it, let me know in the comments what you think about this one. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Was Tom Allen the right hire in your mind? Should they have promoted Anthony Poindexter? Should they have gotten somebody else? We're going to discuss that in today's episode. So Tom Allen is set to be the next defensive coordinator for Penn State, replacing Manny Diaz, who went over to Duke to become the head coach. And all I got to say is, yes, this is a phenomenal hire. This is a great hire for Penn State. This is the kind of hire that Penn State and James Franklin wanted to make. And since Tom Allen was available, you go and get him. But was this the right move? I like Tom Allen a lot. I do. So I think it's the right move. There are a lot of pros. I'm going to discuss some drawbacks in the upcoming segment. But Tom Allen, at purely this hire, you are getting a really intelligent defensive mind. One of the best in all of college football. I know he did not work out in Indiana. I know that, but we saw Manny Diaz didn't work out at Miami of Florida, comes to Penn State, and back-to-back years leads elite defenses for the Nittany Lions. Tom Allen has a similar setup here where he can do the exact same thing. And there's a lot of evidence to back up why Tom Allen can succeed in Happy Valley despite not working out for the Hoosiers. High energy coach. That's another reason I like this move a lot, because James Franklin is high energy. He's emotional, and Tom Allen's going to match that. We've heard James Franklin speak glowingly of Tom Allen in this case, just over the past few years since they played against each other, right? But he's a high energy coach, and he's going to match James Franklin's energy. And it's something that I think the locker room will be able to build around as well. There's not going to be a drop-off from losing Manny Diaz. Manny Diaz, I think, very concise, but also the same thing, very motivational in that regard. Tom Allen, definitely, you're not going to see a drop-off in energy there. For James Franklin, hiring a coordinator, offensive, defense, special teams, right? He's made this point about Stacey Collins as well. But previous head coaching experience is so valuable to him, and it's valuable in this case here. 7 seasons as Indiana's head coach. 7 seasons as a Power 5 football head coach. 7 seasons in the Big Ten as a head football coach. Okay? Manny Diaz was down at Miami of Florida. ACC. I'm not trying to compare the Big Ten to the ACC because that's still a very respectable program that you were coming to after your stint there. But in this case, you don't have any more commonalities than this. Penn State, Indiana share the same conference, right? It's at the same level, even though the programs are on different levels, right? You still have the same level of competition. Tom Allen gets it. He understands how to recruit in the Big Ten, how to coach against these Big Ten teams, right? Manny Diaz had to adjust a little bit, but we saw how well it worked. But Tom Allen just knows the flow of the conference, knows what it's like to go up against Michigan. I get it. The success wasn't there. But You know what it's like to game plan for Michigan. You know the intensity. Ohio State, Maryland, Michigan State, any of the rest of them. Now, it gets a little complicated when those 4 schools from the former Pac-12 come into the Big Ten. That's a little bit of a different story. But you have 7 consecutive seasons as a head coach at Indiana, Power 5 football, Power 4, I guess, still right. I got to get used to that. In the Big Ten, most importantly. He's coached in the Big Ten. He coached in the SEC for Ole Miss as a linebacker and special teams coach. So the experience, the resume speaks for itself for Tom Allen. This is really why I'm enamored with this hire, honestly, is because of the instant success at defensive coordinator when he's been promoted to those spots. So he was a linebackers coach at Ole Miss, and then he took the South Florida job in 2015 as its defensive coordinator, and then went over to Indiana in 2016 and took over that defensive group and was the DC before being promoted in-house to be the head coach. But at USF, this went from one of the worst defenses in 2014 to an exceptional defense in 2015. Numbers do not lie. The numbers do not lie. They were tied 13th in the nation in tackles for loss, 7.5 per game. Aggressive style defense, right? 14th in interception, in total interceptions, 17 total. 24th in takeaways, so 25. Add 8 more fumbles there. 26th in sacks, 2.62 per game. 31st in rushing defense, 141.4 yards per game. 34th in pass efficiency defense, and 35th in scoring defense. So you are around top 30, if not better, in all the important categories. And Penn State had one of the best defenses in all of the country, ranked in the top 5 in a lot of categories, into whether it was pressures, right? Yards for loss, right? All these different things that Manny Diaz did. And now you're getting someone as a defensive coordinator, right? He's not the head coach. I want to make this a very apparent point. He's not a head coach anymore. Like Manny Diaz, he's taking a step back and he can focus on just the defense. He doesn't have to do all the extracurricular stuff that James Franklin's suited for. Okay? He can focus primarily on making the defense as top-notch as it can be. But it's the short turnarounds that are impressive. When he went to Indiana in 2016, this team was one of the worst in the country the year before in 2015, was ranked 120th in total defense, and slashed all the categories in terms of total game yardage by 150 yards at least, roughly, right? 140 here, 145 there, but still pretty impressive to just absolutely shed hundreds of yards. Really impressive to go from Group 5 to the Power 5 level, right? Now we're back to the Power 5 since that was the time being, but to go to Indiana and basically slash off 100 plus yards off of every category imaginable defensively is nothing short of impressive. And when he was with Ole Miss, that team, that defense was by far one of the best in the nation, led the nation in scoring defense in 2014. They only allowed 18 touchdowns in total over the course of that season. That's just a little over a touchdown per game, right? So the resume does speak for itself. The results are there, even though he wasn't the best head coach at Indiana. And I have an explanation for that. I'll tell you about that in the upcoming segment. Another reason that I really like this move for Penn State, Tom Allen's an excellent recruiter. I'd even argue, just from what we've heard from Brian Smith, who's a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and what we've seen, he's a really good recruiter and might even be better. I would probably say that he's a better recruiter than Manny Diaz. Okay. Allen has ties to Florida, if you can believe that, right? He had stints of coaching down in Florida as well as an assistant, coached at the high school level too. And then being in the Midwest, right? Coaching at Indiana and being from there, right? He's from Indiana. He's a former high school football coach at Indiana during his time. He helped land some of the biggest recruits for Indiana in football program history and helped land some of the best recruiting classes as a whole in Indiana football history. So I would say that, yeah, he's either on par with Manny Diaz. I would say that he's even a little better as a recruiter. And you're not going to really miss too much here in terms of the overall style, right? Manny Diaz, high energy, high intensity, right? Demands a lot. Allen's the same way. Similar attacking style defense, right? As you can notice with these statistics that say one of the best in the nation when it comes to tackles for loss in the backfield. So you're getting that aggressive style defense. It's not going to be passive. It's not going to be a lot of zone. It's going to still be aggressive. He coached the linebackers in 2014, so we imagine that he's going to be taking over DC and LB coaching because that's what Manny Diaz was. And well, I would argue, right? That's great that he has the linebacker experience so he can go along with that position group. Again, that's what he coached at Ole Miss, again, with one of the best defensive groups in the nation at that time. But the secondaries that he's able to produce as well, Allen has put together a lot. And you notice that, right? With the passing defense, the interceptions when he was at South Florida, same thing. Indiana, okay, for what it was worth, had some talented secondaries to go along with those teams, even though they weren't the best in the Big Ten consistently. But he has the linebacker experience, but I like what he's able to do with the secondary as well, hopefully being able to team up with, right, Terry Smith and Anthony Poindexter. We'll have a discussion about that a little more in the final segment, but I will admit I was in favor of promoting Anthony Poindexter to this spot. Defensive coordinator at UConn. He was the co-defensive coordinator alongside Manny Diaz in this case, and it just made sense. Was Anthony Poindexter my ultimate top choice right at the top? Well, no, because Elijah Robinson was off the board and D'Anton Lynn was off the board, right? Two former Penn State players who have shown that they're very good defensive coordinators, very good defensive staff members, but they weren't available. And it made sense that Poindexter, who was the co-DC alongside Manny Diaz, would make sense as a natural transition, especially since Poindexter, did turn away from his alma mater when he could have continued to interview and was a serious consideration for that head coaching spot not too long ago, and he stayed. It seemed like this was the idea. So we're just following the paper trail that was led here, but Penn State was truly in a win-win situation. You couldn't have gone wrong either way, whether it was hiring outside of the program. If you missed all of your top options, again, Lynn, Robinson not available. I got to imagine they were on James Franklin's short list, but Tom Allen becomes available. That's one that's not exactly immediately expected because he is the head coach at Indiana at the time, right? When you're thinking about these possibilities, you're thinking that Manny Diaz might take a head coaching job this offseason. You have to be prepared. And all those hypotheticals, some of them came true. But I think Penn State wasn't going to go wrong either way. You get a guy like Tom Allen, or you promote within, you get Anthony Poindexter. Hiring Allen was a smart move. It was a great move. It's an exceptional move. I give it an A, okay? Promoting Anthony Poindexter would have also been smart too. Both of those can be true at the same time. Now, Penn State clearly believes that Tom Allen is a better defensive coordinator right now in end of 2023 going into 2024 than Anthony Poindexter, or else they would have promoted AP. That's all there is left to be said about that. What are the drawbacks of this move? While it is an exceptional hire, it's not exactly perfect, and he did have his struggles in Indiana. So let's address those coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to its peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And welcome back to Locked On Nittany Lions. The Locked On Podcast Network is proud of this one. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering each and every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Tom Allen, great hire by Penn State. I'll give it an A. But there's going to be some concerns with this one because every move it's not exactly perfect, right? You have to address some of the concerns that are going into this one. And we'll talk about just in the final segment how James Franklin is continuing to build an exceptional staff year in and year out, even with all the changes. But Allen specifically, right? Some of the drawbacks of this move are concerns that we need to address. What Allen was not that successful in Indiana. Okay. Had some good seasons, right? 2020 was good. Made some progress. 5-7, 5-7 in his first couple of seasons as a head coach, first time ever head coach at the Power 5 level, but was never great. Was never great. 33-49 overall as a head coach in Indiana, 18-43 in the Big Ten. Yeah, not that. Nope, not that good. Only 2 seasons above 500 and finishing, and one of them was the COVID-19 season in 2020. 2-10, 4-8, 3-9. Those are the records for the last 3 seasons, ultimately leading to his demise and you're receiving the pink slip to not come back to be the Indiana Hoosiers head coach. So, okay. He wasn't the best head coach, right? But you're not asking him to lead a whole program anymore. He is simply responsible for making the defense as good as it can possibly be. And that's a good thing in this case, right? Some coaches might just not be cut out for head coaching or need that reset as we're starting to figure out that the Penn State defensive coordinator spot is really a way to relaunch your career in this case or get your career started, right? Brent Pry, head coach at Virginia Tech. Manny Diaz goes from Miami to Penn State, now to Duke. Tom Allen, could this be an opportunity for him to relaunch his career? Maybe, but he's responsible for one thing and one thing only: the defense. Everything that goes into it. He doesn't have to do all the CEO stuff anymore. That's James Franklin. So, okay, he wasn't a good head coach, but he's been a pretty good defensive coordinator the years that he has been 2015, 2016, and then taking over as the head coach in Indiana when he was promoted. We got to address those defenses because this is the defensive-minded guy, and I know what everybody's going to say in my comments. Zach, his defenses just weren't that good in Indiana. It was awful in 2023. 104th in points per game, 32 points allowed. 104th in yards per game, 419 yards allowed. 116th in red zone efficiency. 90.9% of the time, opposing offenses were scoring against Indiana. Awful in 2022 as well. 120th in points per game, 33.9 points allowed. Okay, I don't need to go any much further than that. Past few years have not been good for the Hoosiers, and they have not been good for Tom Allen defenses. So I talked about the numbers don't lie, right? The numbers don't lie. I said that earlier. But I have a lengthy response to this one, why people might say, well, Tom Allen's defenses, or he doesn't know what he's doing. He's not cut out for it. Okay, that's why I wanted to bring up his time as a defensive coordinator first before we actually address his time at Indiana. I chalk this one up to resources. Indiana, compared to Michigan, compared to Penn State, Ohio State, does not pour in the same resources to football as those schools do. Allen was able to recruit players to Indiana, but as we kind of saw, if you paid close attention to just Big Ten football in general, and Indiana maybe a little bit specifically, a lot of those players were difficult to retain in the age of the transfer portal, NIL. Indiana does not invest the same resources as a Penn State. So there's been lots of turnover on the defensive side of the football, particularly between the draft and players just young in their careers, guys that were highly touted recruits, leaving before they could really step up to the plate for a Tom Allen defense, just in general, Tom Allen offense too. IU, for whatever it's worth, does not have or refuses to use the resources to be competitive in this landscape. NIL, NIL transfer portal, whatever it is. Allen was also the lowest paid head coach in the Big Ten. So what does that tell you? They are just not concerned about being as competitive. Maybe that changes with Kurt Signetti, right? Maybe it changes. Okay. But for the time being, over the past 7 years, when Allen was the head coach in Indiana, just didn't have the exact support that he would like, right? So Indiana just does not care about investing into football as much as other schools in the Big Ten do. But now Allen has that. Allen has the resources to recruit the players that he would ideally like. He has the resources, the time to go coach the way that he wants to coach and doesn't have to run around doing a bunch of other things, right? The point I've already made. He's not being asked to manage as much. He's asked to hyper focus on something specific and has the resources and the backing and the support to accomplish those goals. So, yeah, those Indiana defenses weren't very good, but when Penn State's able to recruit the way that it can recruit, you plop Tom Allen now into a setting like Penn State, where Tom Allen was already able to do less with more with some of those Indiana defenses were pretty good in 2016, 17, 18, 19, 2020. What changed exactly? Well, I've already brought it up. Already brought it up. It's the fact that NIL and the transfer portal were introduced. I'm not trying to harp on those things. I'm not. They're here to stay. You either adapt or you get left behind. And what happened to Indiana? They refused to adapt, so they got left behind. That's the case here. And Tom Allen had to suffer as a result. They were doing pretty well. They were either staying around 500 or they did take that next step. 2019 and 2020, some of the best seasons for Indiana football. And then, boom, the entire landscape changes in a blink of an eye. And Indiana doesn't want to adapt. So what happens? They get left behind in the arms race for college football. Penn State is adapting, has adapted enough, right? They've adapted enough. Not to the extent that everybody would like them to, but they have adapted. So from 2021 to 2023, Indiana was awful because of that point, because they weren't willing to do the things that they needed to get the recruits, to retain the current players. Now Tom Allen has all of that. And that's my point. He was able to do less with more as it was to begin with. Now he has all the more in the world at Penn State. Long-winded there, but another concern that people are probably going to bring up, he's got no connections to Pennsylvania. None whatsoever. Born and raised in Indiana, playing career there, and then he coached a little bit in Florida, right? And then coached in the SEC and then came back to be the head coach in Indiana. It makes sense, right? A little bit of a homecoming. Would this make him inclined to leave if an opportunity returned to an area that he's more familiar with? Or back in Indiana, if some job opens up that I feel like Indiana, right, is the top football job in this case. I guess maybe Purdue one day could open back up, right? But I'm not ultimately sure, and I'm not going to sit back and rank all the head coaching jobs that are available in Indiana. My point being is that this isn't sentimental for him. This is a business decision. This is simply to boost the resume, boost his career. Is this his end all? Well, could he leave in 2 to 3 years, right? We just saw this with Manny Diaz. Manny Diaz comes into Happy Valley, produces 2 elite defenses in back-to-back seasons, and says, I'm out. I'm going to be a head coach again. Does Tom Allen have similar aspirations? That's one of the first questions you got to ask him. One of the first questions I'd like to have for him when he sits down to interview, right? Once it is all official. This is all alleged, of course. So does he want to be a head coach again? Does he view Penn State as an ending destination? I would say probably not at that part. Probably he wants to be a head coach once again. That's how most of these guys are. That really is. But the way that Penn State's defensive coordinator spot has shown that you can fix your career or set it on the right trajectory. It seems to be a relaunch spot, right? Who knows? Maybe he'll stay as Penn State's defensive coordinator for 4 or 5 years because that conversation is going to be had. And Penn State and James Franklin are going to try to do a good job convincing him. But you can't tell me that some Power 4, right? Some Power 4 program could be calling, especially if this move is a slam dunk once again by Penn State and James Franklin. And James Franklin has had a lot of slam dunks with the way that he's been hiring coordinators. Okay, Mike Yurcich didn't go well, but top option and Andy Kotelnicki comes in, right, from Kansas to Penn State. And then you get your top candidate available outside of the program to be your defensive coordinator, along with retaining guys like J1 Sider and Ty Howe. And now you got to work towards Anthony Poindexter. James Franklin, you might have some other concerns about him as a coach, but I'm going to discuss really what he's best at in the next segment. Today's episode is brought to you by Team Ticker, the one-of-a-kind sports sign for all you Nittany Lion fans out there. If you're watching this episode, that right there, my friends, is a Team Ticker. For my audio listeners, my audio subscribers, I'm going to do an exceptional job describing this one to you. Whether it's football, men's and women's basketball, baseball, soccer, or softball, Team Ticker has got you covered truly. Never miss a game as the high-tech retro display provides a countdown to the next big game, as well as daily updates for the latest team news, stats, schedules, standings, rankings, and so much more. Mobile app, along with its design to set up and hang on the wall, is super easy. I had it up and running in minutes. It's a smart sign, so you connect that app to your Wi-Fi, and then that's how it powers all of the daily updates. Each sign is officially licensed, meeting high-quality standards, and is assembled by hand in the United States. Team Ticker is the ultimate upgrade to your Nittany Lions sports collection. And once you hang it on the wall, it's going to be the talk of all your fellow Penn State fans. If you're looking for that one eye-catching item to showcase your team pride or a gift for that special Nittany Lions fan, go to teamticker.com and pick up your Team Ticker today. Team Ticker is the one-of-a-kind sports sign. And from now till the end of the holiday season, if you go to teamticker.com and use promo code LOCKEDON, you get $50 off your Team Ticker purchase. That's right. Team Ticker wants to help out you with your holiday shopping. Teamticker.com, promo code locked on, $50 off your Team Ticker purchase. All you got to do is visit teamticker.com. And remember, for all the latest analysis around Penn State football, men's basketball, subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions. Make us your first listen and watch every single day. Subscribe to the YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. In this final segment, I mean, James Franklin just continues to build this staff and make it one of the best in the country. The Penn State defensive coordinator job has become one of the best assistant coaching jobs in all of the country. It has become a premier spot, something that is sought after, something that is wanted. Penn State doesn't have to settle anymore, and Penn State is being very competitive. They wanted Andy Kotelnicki as the top choice for the next offensive coordinator, and they went and got him. They were able to pull him away from Kansas to make sure that he wasn't interested enough in Oklahoma, who also wanted to make him their next offensive coordinator, and Penn State was able to land him. So my point is, you might be critical of the way that James Franklin, okay, maybe he doesn't call a timeout the right way or anything like that, right? You might have some questions about his in-game coaching. But James Franklin is really good at evaluating coaches and retaining them as well. Penn State has become an attractive spot for assistant coaches to continue to build their careers because the amount of assistants, I know it hasn't worked out with the likes of John Donovan or a Taylor Stubblefield, for example, or recently a Mike Yurcich, but Brent Pry became a head coach. Joe Moorhead became a head coach. Charles Huff became a head coach. Ricky Ronnie, Manny Diaz recently, right? All of those guys able to move and land into a bigger and better spot from the assistant coaching jobs at Penn State. And James Franklin, right? So he struck out with Mike Yurcich, but he hit a home run with Joe Moorhead. He did. Ricky Ronnie was good in his own right, short stint as the offensive coordinator. Brent Pry, he was there for a while, but you saw how good those defenses were under Pry. And then Diaz, to be able to say that, hey, just because you got fired doesn't mean you can't do this job. Came in 2 seasons and had Penn State playing at a college football playoff level on defense. This is something that has been pointed out to me. You notice how no one ever complains about working for James Franklin or has a bad thing to say about James Franklin? All these assistant coaches, whether it worked out at Penn State or not, people seem to at least be neutral on their opinions of James Franklin. The vibe is that people love to work for James Franklin, and it shows. So James Franklin is great at evaluating talent not only from a player standpoint, but from a coaching standpoint as well. Guys that are on the field, guys that are on the sideline. So say what you want to what you want to say about clock management. Fine, I get that, but Franklin knows how to build a team, knows how to build a program. In this case, found the best possible coordinator candidates in this cycle, the ones that were available to them. Penn State went out and got both of them. Right? Penn State did not flinch at the pressure, especially when the stakes are higher than ever. 12-team college football playoff, the expanded Big Ten conference, and Penn State doubles down, and it feels like the staff is better than ever, better than before. James is also good at doing something else, and that's convincing coaches to stay. Because, look, I got to sit back. One of my biggest concerns, and I'm glad I was wrong, and I hope I'm still wrong because the offseason's not over. But J1 Sider, like I said earlier, the everydayers will remember this. He's maxed out his opportunities at Penn State with everything that he can do, aside from play calling, right? Being promoted as the full offensive coordinator and being the play caller, not a co-offensive coordinator, not the run game coordinator, running backs coach, associate assistant, head coach, whatever titles, right? J1 Sider, I think, deserves to be a play caller at some level, not Division two, not Division three. I'm talking Group 5, maybe even a smaller Power 5 football conference, with the way that he's able to recruit, with being the co-offensive coordinator for quite some time now. J1 Sider, the fact that he's still in Happy Valley when he's a Florida guy through and through is very telling about the loyalty and respect that has been built between Franklin and Sider. And I'm impressed. I am. The fact that he's been able to convince a guy like J1 Sider to stay in Happy Valley for as long as this time, especially probably Sider definitely interviewed for the head coach for the offensive coordinator spot. He had to have. But Penn State still goes out and gets Andy Kotelnicki. And Sider in the latest interview doubles down and says, why would I want to make a lateral move when Penn State is the spot? That's pretty telling, isn't it? Because in my mind, there's no reason that Sider couldn't be a play caller, an offensive coordinator play caller at another institution, at something as big as Penn State, or even better, like Georgia or something like that, Texas, Alabama. No, but could he go to a Group 5 and be a co-offensive, or be a full-time offensive coordinator and a play caller? Absolutely. I would even argue a Power 4 that is slightly smaller than Penn State, right? But in this case, he's staying in Happy Valley. How about Anthony Poindexter? And the jury's not out because he, again, was passed up for the defensive coordinator spot. And we know for a fact that he did interview for that defensive coordinator spot. Poindexter passed up his alma mater, UVA, Virginia, College Football Hall of Fame playing career there, to stay at Penn State as the co-defensive coordinator, probably with the idea in mind that eventually he'd be promoted to the DC spot. Was in the thick of it for the head coaching job just 2 years ago and decided to come back to Penn State. Okay. Those are those position coaches. How about the strength and conditioning coach? There were rumors swirling around that Chuck Losey was going to leave to go to his alma mater at Vanderbilt, and decides to stay in Happy Valley. 1, 2, 3. James Franklin able to retain all of them for the most part, right? We're still waiting on Poindexter in this case, but it'll be interesting because I do think Penn State had a contingency plan here. You don't know that Tom Allen's going to get fired by Indiana. You don't know about the stuff that's going on at Texas A&M when you're planning all these things, right? Elijah Robinson or D'Anton Lynn, would he consider coming back to Penn State? And the timing of it. Timing is everything. Manny Diaz accepts that Duke head football coach job when Lynn and Robinson are in the process of interviewing for their respective positions now at USC and Syracuse. Maybe things are different. Maybe Robinson is the defensive coordinator. Tom Allen, still head coach in Indiana. Maybe they give him another chance and don't hire Curt Cignetti. Who knows what's different here? But I really do think Penn State and James Franklin had a contingency plan to make Anthony Poindexter the next defensive coordinator, albeit he wasn't the first choice, but that's why you call it contingency, right? Because I genuinely believe this was the backup plan if all of this didn't fall into place, right? Timing is everything. Poindexter as the defensive coordinator, and then Ola Adams. Remember, Ola Adams was an analyst on the staff. He accepted the defensive backs coach job at Indiana with Coach Cignetti. So you promote him from analyst to safeties. And like I said, remember timing. Ola Adams was hired immediately. by Indiana very early in the cycle, just accepted that spot with the Hoosiers. How ironic, right? You take Tom Allen as the defensive coordinator, Ola Adams goes back, and this is my hypothetical blueprint here. But I really do think that this was an idea. You have to have option A, and if A doesn't work, you go to B. Then you go to C, you go to D, E, F, G, right down the alphabet. You have to be able to do that in college football because your first plan isn't going to work out. Your second plan definitely isn't. Your third, fourth, fifth plan, probably not either. That's why you got to be prepared to have a sixth, a seventh, and eighth. Unlimited options. And I think this was one of them. But now it's a matter of being able to convince Coach Poindexter once again to stay in Happy Valley. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. I appreciate each and every one of you checking out this episode. If you're not already, become an everyday or subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Let me know in the comments, once again, what do you think of this hire by Penn State, Tom Allen, as the next defensive coordinator for the Nittany Lions? We're going to talk about it more and discuss all the latest here about Penn State football, men's basketball, and so much more on Locked On Nittany Lions.